I have to admit I still find all this hard to believe. All my life I was told that wars are won by bravery and skill at arms, only for you to waltz right into my camp to tell me that all our problems are going to be resolved by a bunch of bankers far away from the front lines. I'm afraid there's only so much our gold can do, Mr. President, so I'm sure you'll have enough opportunities to prove your worth in battle before the end. But this situation was our main goal when we started the revolution all these years ago. We wanted to create a nation that wouldn't be forced to fight to protect its interests. Old Ulrich always said that a truly enlightened republic can build and trade its way out of any trouble. Today, this dream finally seems possible. That's an admirable goal to be sure, but what about other nations? What could stop the Venetians or our other enemies from taking our money and using it to continue their war against us? Common sense, sir. Whatever opinion you may have about our enemies, you can't deny that they are reasonable and pragmatic. They responded to Leopold's call to arms, but kept their forces out of the main conflict. That way nobody can question their honor, but at the same time, they kept their options open. They simply stand to lose more than they could gain, even if they could somehow turn this war around and push us back towards our borders. Have you ever heard the phrase, too big to fall? That's a pretty good description of the Commonwealth right now. If we lose, everyone loses. The only nation that could potentially gain something from our defeat would be Great Britain, and there's not a single country in the world that would like to see them gain even more power. As for our other enemies, once Republic of Genoa realizes that Venice, their main trade competitor, made a deal with us, they will rush to sign the peace treaty as soon as they can, to make sure they won't miss out on the more lucrative trade contracts. And as for the Pope, let's just say that Vatican has always been refreshingly open to generous donations. His Holiness may be bitter about us kicking his Jesuits out of the country, but at this point he realizes that a dozen chests of gold and a few preferential trade contracts is the best deal he can expect. So that leaves only British and Austrian forces to deal with. The Empire may be done for, but I doubt Queen Victoria will give up so easily. I wouldn't worry too much about the British. After all, they have Poniatowski to deal with. All we have to do is to give him enough time before we cut him off. But right now I'm more concerned about Vienna. The eyes of the world are looking at you, President. Have you finally made your decision? Yes, and we have a good Swedish doctor to thank for it. He was the only one brave enough to officially confiscate all the alcohol around the entire camp. Hell, he even ambushed me when I was trying to buy a bottle from one of the camp followers. Never saw him so angry before. Well, he did save your life back in Stockholm, so I doubt he'd like to see you drink yourself to death. And besides, you are a living proof of his skills. As long as you're around, he'll be a major authority on all medical matters around the world. But back on topic, are you finally ready to take Vienna? Yes, no, look, I don't want to do this, but I know I have to. We need to send the world a clear message, and we won't do that by sitting around and waiting for the Emperor and his men to starve to death. Once the final preparations are complete, we will begin our assault. That's what I wanted to hear. I know it can be easy to send your men into the breach once again, but after that last effort, all of this will be over. There will finally be peace. So, since you are committed, I'm going to ride east and try to convince the Ottomans to lend a hand. Most of their forces have retreated towards Istanbul. Some nonsense about mysterious lights floating above the city, but there are still some lesser nobles who stayed behind. I'll do my best to send them your way, and we'll take Vienna as allies. I wish you luck, President, and do not worry yourself about Great Britain. I have a feeling that soon they will have far more pressing concerns than their war with us. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 24 of the Crownless Eagle. We're picking up right where we left off, during British retaliatory assault on Poniatowski's forces stationed in Edinburgh, but we don't really have time for a recap because enemy troops are already climbing the walls, and some of their more enthusiastic soldiers are making their way towards our Albanian company, the only unit we have on our eastern ramparts. So now those Albanians will have to leg it because they cannot fight toe-to-toe in melee against the Redcoats, but that will enable our foes to capture the gate mechanism. Our men will sabotage it before running away, but it's only a matter of time before British troops manage to open the gate, clearing the way for the rest of their comrades. The battle had only just begun, and we have already been pushed back from the walls and into the main square, not the beginning Poniatowski had in mind here. Thankfully, there are some good news as well. Enemy artillery crews have been so focused on battering down our bastions, they completely forgot about shooting my troops inside the fortress, so this should lower our casualties. And now, with our cavalry safely out of the way of main British line, they can ride around the fort and try to take enemy cannons out, since they are almost undefended. And in the meantime, our infantry will dig in inside the walls. The enemy might have been able to scale the defences, but if they want to take Edinburgh back, they will have to work for it. Soon British troops started pouring onto the main square, but after receiving few rounds of canister shot they backed off and instead focused their efforts on capturing one of the buildings. A smart move, since said building is manned by our light infantry, who will be decimated in close quarters room-to-room melees. And to make matters worse, our gunners somehow decided that firing at the building where the melee takes place will be a good idea, and so they sent clouds of grape shot right into the side that was still mostly manned by our own soldiers, killing about 30 of our own men who stood in the windows. This will not help us hold this building. And as expected, after taking severe casualties, roughly 100 men in about 2 minutes, our light troops lost their resolve and broke off, desperately trying to fight their way outside. Most of them will die during that escape attempt, but thankfully after a while the British backed off as well, realizing that our guns are far more dangerous than this now abandoned structure. So, a handful of our men will be able to retreat, and no doubt they will be stopping near the cannons to have some serious talk with our overzealous gunners. But at this point Poniatowski finally noticed what's happening and stepped in, ordering the gunners to target the gap between the now lost barracks and the wall, where most of enemy troops were massing for the next push. And now finally the canister shot will do its job, carving bloody holes in ranks of still regrouping redcoats. But while this was happening, outside of the fort our overconfident cavalry got outflanked and ambushed by their British counterparts, and our enemies played this perfectly because their horse regiments specifically targeted our lancers, who are very vulnerable to being charged. So now we can't pull back, not without suffering even more losses, and instead we are forced to commit to this melee, and to make it even worse for us, British commander kept some dismounted dragoons in reserve, and they will now provide fire support to their mounted comrades. Our horsemen are in for a tough one. Though arguably the redcoats who got into the fortress in a first wave will have even worse time, running a gauntlet of canister shot and musket crossfire. I have to admit I fully expected them to turn around after they've seen our defensive positions, but instead they pushed forward, shaken but not deterred, and they almost reached our gun battery, which forced one of our line companies to countercharge them. And the war cry of our men finally woke those redcoats from their blood rage. They stopped, looked around, realized that they are surrounded by hundreds of enemies, and broke off after just a few seconds. Still, if even a single British company can muster enough courage to get this close to our lines despite overwhelming odds, then I don't even want to think what will happen once their entire army arrives. Also, you can also see here just how badly our calf fight goes. We're winning, technically, but we're losing so many men as if we were losing. You can see on the bottom of the screen that the majority of our lancers are already gone, taken out by fire coming from those dismounted dragoons. And let's not forget, we can't replenish our troops here, so if this will continue, we'll be left without cavalry support, severely reducing our strategic and tactical mobility. Not to mention that it will be very difficult to raid the countryside without horsemen. But hey, at the very least we were able to silence those guns, and on the southern side of the fort our horse archers got a drop on enemy commander and managed to take him out in a very spectacular way, by firing their bows while simultaneously fighting in melee, something that only the most experienced steppe riders can pull off. But here's the thing, normally killing enemy commander would be a decisive blow, a morale-shattering strike that would demoralize the entire enemy force and send them packing, but not here. Enemy commander have been turned into a pincushion, but his men don't seem to care, and their attack continues as if nothing happened. I don't know what reward Queen Victoria promised to the man who will bring her Poniatowski's head, but it must be something spectacular if it can convince even the rank-and-file troops to push forward with such ferocity. Still, although enemy morale is still high, death of their general had at least one desired effect. Namely, it completely knocked out British command chain, and now all those companies around the fort will get completely disorganized without orders from their commander. Some will try to storm the main square, where they will be greeted by a hailstorm of bullets and canister shot, others will try to seize control of different parts of the walls, and one company will just hold their position above the eastern gate to prevent us from retaking the mechanism and locking their comrades inside the fort. Though admittedly the most dangerous situation is on the western side. With all our units facing east, some redcoats managed to get inside the fortress without encountering too much resistance, and now they will be able to attack our rear. Poniatowski immediately redeployed one of his companies to hold enemy advance, but he himself is not going to move anywhere. He may be in danger of being shot in the back, but he will show his men he doesn't care for danger, so it will be up to his troops to keep their great general alive. A few minutes later, our enemies managed to capture yet another gate, southern one. and more redcoats rushed into the fort where we had to compress our formation to deal with that new front. But as you can see, enemy attack was a weird one. British soldiers simply marched in, completely exhausted, in a column formation, right into the line of fire of our muskets and cannons, and now they will pay a heavy price for it. A few clouds of canister shot and volleys from our ranks finally woke them up from their parade mode, and their officer finally ordered a charge, but he died almost immediately after that, his death disorganizing his men even more. They will try to reform and return fire, but another few volleys will convince them to leave. Also, we have to deal with yet another breach, this time on the northern side. A few redcoats managed to get down onto the main square, but our men were already waiting for them, so we should have little trouble clearing this flank. And some more good news. Our company that was stationed above the northern gate managed to beat British company that tried to scale the walls, so now our men can rush down the stairs and help out in the main fight. We spent next 10 or so minutes beating back enemy disorganized attacks, and now only a handful of their men are still in any shape to fight, and they will try to open up yet another front by attacking through the northern gate. They sent a few men into the now undefended wall, while the rest prepared to rush in as soon as the gates were open. But while our enemies scaled the walls and then wrestled with the gate mechanism, we had enough time to move some of our own units to form a ring of steel around the gate, and as you can see, the redcoats are getting absolutely demolished by our welcoming committee, the officer leading their attack being the first one to fall. But, as mentioned before, redcoats have very high morale, so they will not break so easily, and instead will try to reform and fight back, which, when you think about it, is actually the worst thing they could do right now. They won't open fire until all of their men are properly formed, so now they will just get slaughtered by our volleys. If they had retreated, they could have at least reform and try again in some other, preferably less defended place, but now they will just pointlessly die. Not that it concerns Poniatowski in any way, but it's always a shame to see so many lives thrown away so senselessly. Still, it shows us just what kind of resistance awaits our great general in his campaign. If a lone, leaderless company can withstand so much punishment, then I dread to think what awaits us in the south. It looks like we're going to have to pay a heavy price in blood for every step towards London. But we'll worry about the future later. For now we still have a battle to win, but if you look at the balance bar you'll see that now it's basically over. After beating back the attack in the north, the only enemy unit that remained on the battlefield was that dismounted dragoon brigade that dealt so much damage to our cavalry. There was also that company stationed above the eastern gate, but they were too terrified to move or even shoot back at our men, so they don't count. But for the last few minutes, British dragoons tasted their own medicine, as our Kalmucks harassed them without mercy. Our horse archers rode into range, loosed a volley of arrows, and then turned back to flee, without giving an enemy a chance to shoot back. We suffered some return fire, of course, because it cannot be too easy, but at this point those dragoons realized they probably won't achieve anything by trying to chase our horsemen down, and after some more arrow fire, they finally decided it's time to leave and fight another day. They will try to run back to their horses to mount up and ride away, but now that their backs are turned to us, our Kalmucks can holster their bows, draw their swords and just ride enemy runners down. We've beaten British counterattack. Time to reduce this fortress to rubble and move on. London awaits. This, however, might be easier said than done. See, even though the game qualifies the result of this battle as a decisive victory, the reality is somewhat less optimistic. We have lost about 1/3 of our forces in this fight, and it was our cavalry that took most of the casualties, which will severely reduce our mobility in this campaign. Not to mention that our trigger-happy artillerymen killed around 100 of our own troops, something that they really should be punished for if only we had someone around here who could replace them. As it stands, Poniatowski will simply cut their rations, but only for a few days, because he cannot afford to aggravate his limited troops. Also, there were over 1,000 survivors on the British side, and they managed to retreat in a relatively good order back to Newcastle. No doubt we'll meet them again on our way south. So now in the next turn it's time for Poniatowski to continue his attack. As you can see, over the last month Edinburgh has been razed almost to the ground, with every important building being blown up or torched down by our forces. We even raided farms around the countryside and took all the food we could carry to replenish our limited supplies. We also sent a group of soldiers towards Glasgow to destroy the port there, but shortly before our men arrived, a contingent of troops arrived from Ireland and kept our raiders at bay. It's not exactly the best situation, after all ports are vital to British economy, so leaving them operational will help them recover, but we really can't do anything about it right now, since we cannot afford to get bogged down here in Scotland, because every day we spend here in the north gives British Army more time to prepare defences around their capital. So, we'll continue south. If those Irish want to retake Edinburgh, they can have it. They won't find anything useful there, other than ashes, rubble and mass graves. Now, before we head south, there's still one thing we have to do, link up with our new friends. Basically, Poniatowski managed to convince around 600 Scotsmen to join his campaign, and they will now form 2 regiments of expatriate infantry, the Highlanders and Lowlanders. Now, this infantry is nothing special, they're actually weaker than our regular line infantry, but at the very least they can be used to pad the numbers of our army, something Poniatowski very much needs right now. And since they are a new addition to his very elite force, they will now have to prove themselves, and what better way to do it than by serving on a front line, taking bullets meant for our other troops. But hey, we gave those Scots an opportunity to fight against their hated enemies from England. Least they could do is to repay the favour, and they actually will have a chance to do it almost immediately, because on our way south we're going to deal with remnants of that British army that attacked us recently. And here's an odd thing. When we looked at the battle results screen, it clearly said that there were slightly over 1,000 British survivors, but here we can see only around 900 men, so it seems British army retreated with many wounded who did not survive the trip south. Not that it matters really, because now they are trapped in Newcastle, and we're going to make them pay for all the losses we took. Now, this is one of those battles that normally I'd just auto-resolve, but just like during the assault on Edinburgh, I'll fight it myself just to reduce the casualties. The battle itself wasn't really interesting. Basically, we deployed on a hill and began an artillery barrage to force redcoats to come to us, but that gave us time to look at our new Scottish troops, and, well, they're nothing special, just like their stats. Basically, they were the same colour scheme as our line infantry, but inverted, with white overcoats and red decorations, which incidentally makes them far more visible than the rest of our troops. I'm sure Poniatowski spun some convincing story after he issued them those uniforms, but let's be honest here, they're wearing white because we want redcoats to fire at them and not at the rest of our men. We even attached our own officers to those 2 Scottish companies just to make sure they know their place. Let's just hope Poniatowski didn't go too far. After all, these Scots won't be of any use to us if they all get killed in their first battle. Fortunately, this is hardly a battle, it's more of a skirmish or a cleanup operation. After our cannonballs carved some bloody holes in British ranks, they decided it's time to bring the battle to us. But before they reached our lines, our artillery just had a field day blasting them apart, using their elevated positions to score some really impressive shots. This prompted remnants of enemy cavalry to push forward, only to be slaughtered by our Scottish allies, who greeted English dragoons with a perfectly formed square. By the time they arrived, their redcoat infantrymen were tired, shaken and severely damaged by our cannons, but that did not stop them from engaging our line in quite a serious firefight. However, with enemy cavalry out of the field, our own horsemen had a free reign of the battlefield, and after that last battle they itched for revenge, so they rode around enemy formation, huddled together on the edge of the forest, and attacked them from the back. And that was it. Remnants of General Chapman's army have been decimated once again, and we've only lost around 100 men in this fight. Time to burn Newcastle down and move on. We'll leave Poniatowski to do his thing for now, and instead focus our attention on the main front, where our armies are preparing to deliver one final strike that will remove Austria-Hungarian Empire from the map. First, in the west, General Bugajski, supported by Commander Mickiewicz and his warband, will march on towards Strasbourg, once held by France and now occupied by a handful of bloodied imperial soldiers. We tried to convince them to surrender peacefully, but they refused our offer, so Bugajski decided he's not going to wait and instead immediately ordered his men to storm the walls, to show Austrian defenders that there won't be second chances. Now, we've lost quite a lot of men in this assault, but in the end it doesn't really matter. Strasbourg was the last holding Austria had in the west, so now with this flank secured we can simply replenish our losses without worrying about counterattacks. Also, our scouts can now move further west, and they bring reports about Dutch armies patrolling the French countryside. And what's surprising is that those armies are actually damaged, so it seems that Kingdom of France is still kicking. Who knows, maybe one day their resistance will gain enough supporters to actually let them re-emerge. So, we've taken out the westernmost Austrian region, so now it's time to take the one in the east. Last turn, our army of steppe riders, who, let's be honest, kinda missed the whole war, learned that our Ottoman allies have actually failed to capture almost undefended Transylvania. How the Austrians managed to beat them back, I have no idea, but that opened up an opportunity for our nomads to actually do something useful. So, they rode to Klausenburg, the capital of the region, surrounded it and gave enemy forces one chance to surrender. And then they waited. And waited, and waited. And finally, after what seemed like forever, commander of Klausenburg garrison finally accepted our offer, and his forces lowered their weapons, robbing our raiders of a chance to do some pillaging and plundering. Also, it seemed at least, because even though our enemies surrendered without firing a shot, a huge column of smoke somehow appeared above the city shortly after our men rode into it. We'll need to have a word with Ataman Wróblewski, but at the very least his nomads haven't destroyed anything permanently, and I really hope they haven't got into the spirit of the place by impaling some of our enemies on the stakes. Who am I kidding? Of course they did. Impaling people was, if I remember correctly, the favourite and only pastime in the area. Hopefully this bloody display won't wake any sinister power lurking in these lands, but we'll worry about that later. For now we can rejoice. There is only Vienna left for us to conquer. Our preparations are still not done though. Next order of business is taking Bahamas from the British, likely our last conquest in Americas considering the ridiculous amount of manpower Queen Victoria mobilized in the colonies. Now, Bahamas are actually defended by over 10,000 men, while our invasion force is only around 3,000 strong. But aside from one general's retinue, all those men British have there are actually just local militiamen. There are no cannons, no cavalry, not even a single unit of professional infantry, only a horde of poorly armed and undisciplined troops. And when they saw our forces marching towards them, they just gave up, took their belongings and left, leaving Nassau, the major town on those islands, completely undefended. Now, I was just as surprised as our men must have been, but I'm not going to complain. After all, we've taken our rich island chain without firing a shot. That has to be worth something. Of course, now that means our forces can be attacked by the combined strength of those two British armies, but we're not going to worry about it. In fact, even though we could technically pursue those militiamen, Lichorobits decided he's not going to. If those men don't want to fight, he argues, then he won't force them. He'll give them 1 month to leave the island, he won't chase them, he won't blockade the port, and he won't intercept the fleet that could try to extract them. Too much blood has already been shed here. If we can win on this front without casualties on either side, then it will be far better victory than the one we had to pay in blood. And that's the last of them. Pleasure doing business with you, General, though in all honesty I constantly expected a knife in the back. Glad to see I was mistaken. As an officer of the Commonwealth, I have a certain reputation to uphold, Commander. Would be unseemly of me to offer you a deal only to betray you afterwards, though I suppose it's only fair for you to be reserved, as I was expecting you to back out of the deal as well. A decade ago maybe, but today there's just no point in throwing lives away for Britain. We may be wearing their uniforms and speak their language, but my lads and I, we're all locals, so to speak. There was a time when being a colonist meant something. Hell, even old William treated us well, though I suppose it's because he was a Dutchman and they know how important overseas possessions are. Sadly, his successor couldn't be more different. There isn't a month without some new tax or new edict curtailing our lives here. We're supposed to send most of our wealth back to Europe and at the same time feed the armies she sails across the ocean. But when we actually need those armies to help out with bandits or those Indian raiders, they just kick our petitioners out. London is still where it was 10 years ago, but at the same time it's growing more distant with every passing year. I know the sentiment, Commander. Negligent rule was the reason our own monarchy fell in the first place. So I've heard. Not gonna lie, that stunt you pulled off back in Europe really had people talking. Especially since it seems it's working out pretty well for you. You haven't heard this from me, but many people around colonies are thinking about doing the same thing. Sure could use your help though. Can't say for the rest of the Commonwealth, but as a military governor of Caribbean charter, I can see if something couldn't be arranged. A ship full of armaments lost on your coast, or some highly trained professionals going for a trip around your lands. But don't jump at the prospect of revolution just yet, Commander. Things like that take time, long and very difficult time. If you'll just throw yourself into action without preparing, you will only drag your people into an early grave. Of course, I'm not the one who makes the decisions anyway. But I'll relay your words to those who do, and in time our colonies will be just as free as your Commonwealth. I'm sure of it. And now it's time for finishing touches. It might have been our soldiers who paved the way to this moment, but now it's time for men of words and wealth to put our grand plan together. Acting in unison on a single autumn day, our ambassadors across Italy approached local leaders with generous gifts and messages of peace. First one was our ambassador in Venice, accompanied by a convoy of carts, all carrying coins minted in the Commonwealth. Our man entered the chambers of Great Council of the Most Serene Republic, and when, after several long and tense hours, he finally left, Venice and the Commonwealth were once again friends and trading partners, and one debt of some now insignificant man was paid in full. In Savoy, and actually that was the first time I even realized we were at war with them, the negotiations went faster. The Dutch were massing on Prince Victor's borders, and he eagerly accepted the gift, and stability that friendship with the Commonwealth brought. In Genoa, the Council of Merchants acted aloof at first, but when they learned about the same negotiations taking place in Venice, they immediately pulled back, and soon our ambassador left the council without his gold, but with a piece of paper that proclaimed eternal peace and cooperation between our two republics. And in Rome, in resplendent halls of Pope's palace, His Holiness Clement, 11th of his name, blessed the generous emissary of the Commonwealth and granted the growing nation an indulgence for their sins. The god himself has been turned to our side with a shiny coin. Our preparations are complete. Leopold Habsburg, Kaiser of the Holy Roman Empire, now stands alone. Not even divine intervention is going to save him now. It's time to finally bring this man to justice for his crimes, and it will be none other than our very president, Sebastian Stolarski, who will lead the attack on Vienna. Imperial forces are not going to make this easy, that's for sure, but we're not going to be alone in this fight, as some of our Ottoman allies are going to join in, and I think this really is a sign that balance of power has changed in Europe. 32 years ago, Polish-lithuanian forces defeated Turkish army that besieged Vienna, and now we're going to storm the walls together. One thing we can say for sure. No matter how this battle will go, tomorrow we'll be looking at a completely different Europe. Let's finish this. So, on this beautiful autumn day, our forces will once again have to throw themselves into the breach. If we succeed today, the reward is going to be worth the effort. As you can see, President Stolarski deployed his staff and his artillery on a hill overlooking the fort, but most importantly, from this position he can see what is beyond it. Our final goal, the city of Vienna, can be seen just on the horizon, a reminder to both our commander and all his troops just how far they have come, and how close they are to finally bringing peace to the Commonwealth. Also, we can see that some Austrian forces have, apparently, been stationed outside of the fort, possibly as lookouts, and now they scramble to get back into the cover of the walls. At first I wanted to send our cavalry to harass them, but then I realized it's probably a trap. If they want to hide behind the walls, we'll let them, at least until we reduce said walls to rubble. And we're going to use irregular tactics here. Most of our troops are deployed in such a way as to attack the fort from one of the corners, where our guns will have an easier time to open up breaches in more than one side. That way we shouldn't get bogged down like we had in Stockholm. We'll leave our gunners to do their thing for now and take a look at the men who will take part in this attack. While majority of our armies are mostly composed of line infantry, in Stolarski's force these regular soldiers are replaced by Republican Guard, an elite regiment of heavy infantry, effective both in melee and in a firefight. They are perfectly drilled, very disciplined and carry best weapons from our factories. And also, perhaps surprisingly, they wear very simple uniforms, sort of a white, medieval-like tabard thrown over a plain red uniform. One could expect that our most elite unit would be finally dressed in some elaborate show of uniform, but these men clearly prefer utility over looks, the only decorations on their uniforms being a small round symbol on their chests and some curvy lines at their forearms. Perhaps that is the point. There are Sons of the Republic after all, and they do not need to parade around in wigs and white tights. Simple clothes for simple men. They have a job to do, and that job is killing enemies of the Commonwealth. Fancy suit would only get in the way. After a while we managed to break down 2 sections of the walls, so now our forces began their advance, and leading them will be our Blackfoot tribe warriors, a melee-only specialist unit that excels in charging into the fray without hesitation. These are the warriors who decided to join Stolarski after Mickiewicz sailed back from Americas, and they have been waiting for their chance at glory since the beginning of this campaign. And now they finally have it. They will be the first ones to charge into the breach, and their tomahawks will, hopefully, carve a bloody path for the rest of our forces. And they will fight with double their usual ferocity. Their comrades under Mickiewicz have been relegated to the second line, so now it's up to them to show those pale faces how true warriors fight. But Austrian defenders are not going to make this easy. When they saw our warriors approaching, enemy commander ordered one of his regiments to charge through the breach in order to stall us. And that's actually a really good idea, because now our warriors will only have a limited area to fight, so they won't be able to truly utilize their melee superiority. Now, the initial charge works surprisingly well, with some of our men being able to surround that Imperial company, but now that we stopped, we're going to have to slowly grind our way forward, constantly under fire from inside the fort. Let's hope bravery and ferocity of our warriors will be enough to break through. And I have to say, I'm sorry, I really am. I really wanted to give you all a nice climactic battle to finish this war, but, well, you can see what's going on. We're having bugs again, and this time we're not going to be saved by killing enemy commander. The game will just play like this for almost entirety of the battle, which makes it really unpleasant to watch. Still, let's at the very least cover the more important parts of it. When I realized our tribal warriors are getting pushed back by sheer number of enemy troops, I decided to send in 2 companies of Republican Guard to help. But by then I also realized that this particular breach is a lost cause. Enemy forces massed there to keep us out, so of course we're going to have to commit some of our own troops to keep them busy, but it will be the second breach where we will be able to make any progress, and even that won't be enough. We also sent our most elite company, the first one, to scale the walls together with 1 unit of light foot. But because climbing the walls is practically a suicide in Empire, these men are not going to do much. For the rest of the battle they will just desperately try to establish a foothold while fighting off 3 or 4 Austrian units, but that too will not be enough to win. However, when Imperial Commander committed all of his troops to contain us in the breaches, 1 unit of light infantry sneaked around the fort and managed to open the southern gate, and that was a decisive moment in this battle, because now our experienced cavalry can use this gate to ride into the fort and attack Imperial forces in the back, and most importantly, we'll finally be able to silence enemy mortars, because they dealt surprisingly high casualties to our men. Those mortar crews were in fact so brave, or so desperate depending on the point of view, that they actually continued to fire their mortars even as our national cavalrymen were right on top of them. Now of course it is rather difficult to fire a mortar at a target that is standing right next to it, but nonetheless the psychological effect of those explosions thundering among our men must have been severe. And to make matters even more complicated, those gunners decided to fight to the last, and together they managed to take out around 20 of my horsemen, something that has never happened before. But then again, their backs really are against the wall here, so I shouldn't have expected anything else. And it was the same situation with enemy commander, as he and his men never once faltered, despite overwhelming odds stacked against them. And because Austrian bodyguards were actually cuirassiers, the best cavalry in the game, their resistance costed us a lot of men and even more time. And for every second we lost fighting in the center of the fort, our frontline troops, both guardsmen and tribal warriors, had to pay a price in blood. Even as enemy commander has finally been slain, the resolve of his troops remained unshaken. In fact, his bodyguards, despite failing at their job, have fought to the bitter end, costing us even more men. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you will see that our losses are starting to look surprisingly severe, considering we are the superior force here. But at this point, nothing else can be done. We just have to cut and slash our way through. But finally, after a long time, our cavalrymen finally killed the last Imperial soldier in the main square, and immediately charged at the back of enemy units that fought us at the walls. With both sides being completely exhausted due to prolonged melees, the battle once again turned into a grind, as our charge turned out to be surprisingly ineffective. But slowly, meter by meter, we pushed Austrians back, and though they looked like they were determined to fight us to the last, soon first cracks began to show. Perhaps someone in Imperial ranks panicked, perhaps they realized they're the only ones left, or perhaps they simply had enough. It doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that after a while, Austrians just gave up and turned to flee. Finally. After so much effort, Vienna is finally in our grasp, but the time for celebration will be later. We still have an emperor to put down. It's done. The casualties we suffered in this battle do not matter, because the last one of the would-be partitioners of Poland is now gone from the map. A second empire our forces have put down in less than a decade. But we are not done. Not yet. There is still one enemy of the Commonwealth left, hiding in the British Isles. So, we will see what fate has in store for our last foe, and see the resolution of our worldwide conflict in the next, and final, episode of the Crownless Eagle. See you next time. Stay down, sir. Keep your head down. They're still shooting through the windows. I can see that, Colonel. How long do you think they will hold? I don't think there's much more fight left in them, sir. They already kicked us out from the eastern wing 2 times, but ever since our cannons arrived, we've been making steady progress. Won't be long now, sir. A day at best. I think you're wrong, Colonel. I'm pretty sure they're going to surrender right now. What? How do you know, sir? Is there another attack coming from the other side? Nothing so dramatic, Colonel. They just stopped firing, and now it seems they are lowering their banners. And if my eyes don't deceive me, one of their officers is walking towards us. Blast! Stay back, sir. This must be a trap. Calm down, Colonel. Hold your fire, everyone. We will not be shooting a man under a white banner. Look at him. He's just a kid, and he looks like he's barely holding himself together. Yes, sir. Nobody would expect him to be an assassin. You there, boy. That's close enough. State your intentions. Guten Tag, gentlemen. I am Lieutenant Zintler, 2nd Company of Imperial Guard. My apologies, I'm sure you were expecting someone else, but as it stands, I'm the only remaining officer of the Guards. The rest didn't make it. Then you are to be commended for mounting a heroic defense, Lieutenant Zintler. If you were on our side, the Commonwealth would reward you well for your bravery, but I assume you're not here to exchange pleasantries, so get to the point. I don't suppose I could convince you to call off the attack, go home and sign a white peace? No, I didn't think so. In that case, I'm here to offer our unconditional surrender. Our fate is in your hands, President. My men have already unloaded their weapons and gathered in the main ballroom. They won't give you any more trouble. Now, if you and your men would follow me, I will take you to His Majesty and his court. What's left of it, anyway. So that's it. Ha! So much for the famed Imperial Guard defending their liege to their last breath. We should force the Skid to bring Leopold to us. It's him who wants to surrender after all. I'm afraid that won't be possible, sir. Just follow me, please. You'll see soon enough. Ah, you finally arrived. I'm sure Lieutenant Zintler told you already, but as the High Chancellor, allow me to officially, on behalf of House Habsburg and Empire of Austria-Hungary, offer our surrender. Yes, we are aware of that, but you know just as well as me why we're here. Zintler, you were supposed to bring us to the Emperor. Where is he? Right here, sir. I don't have time for joke. Oh. What happened? A ricochet, sire? Nobody could have predicted it, and nobody could have defended against it. We did all we could, but the court physician died yesterday, so we had no idea how to stop the bleeding. His Majesty took his last breath about an hour ago. I can't believe it. Sir, I assure you... I can't believe it! He dragged us into this mess. He sent an assassin to kill my predecessor. He schemed against us with Russians, Swedes and British for the past decade, and now, when we finally got the chance to make him pay for all his crimes, he just dies? This is not how his story should end. He should have been put on a trial, and he should have been dragged across the streets of Warsaw and beheaded for all the world to see. Or at the very least, he should have died fighting, sword in hand, defending his title to the last breath. Not like this. Sir, now is not the time. We need to keep moving and secure the rest of the building. What do you want me to do with this lot here? Just take them away from my sight. Round them up and take them to our camp. If they want to live, they can start by sharing all their secrets. Zintler, are you sure that all of your people who wanted to surrender? Once you're gone, we'll clear the rest of the palace. There will be no second chances. I thought so, sir, but now that you mention it, I can't see Augustus anywhere. Quiet! Augustus? Yes, one of Leopold's advisors. Big, strong man. I could swear he was with us just a few moments ago. Mr. Stolarski? Nobody moves an inch. Colonel, are you sure your men have the palace surrounded? Good. Then send a runner back to them and tell nobody leaves the palace without my permission, understood? Now, Lieutenant Zintler, you said your fate is in my hands, and you were right. If you and the rest of you lot want to see tomorrow, you will answer my next question honestly and without omission. Is there a basement in this palace? Yes, sir. There is a staircase not far from here. Good. Time for you to prove yourself, kid. Come with me. Colonel, you stay here, and if any one of those bastards so much as blinks, you have my permission to shoot them. We're going to end this once and for all. Damn those Austrian fools, there must be an escape route around here somewhere. I haven't gone this far just to lose now. I'm afraid it's too late for that, August von Wettin. Running away with your tail between your legs again, I see. I had my suspicions about your involvement, and lo, here you are, skulking in the shadows, proving me right. But it's all over now. You have escaped the Commonwealth once, and too many people have died because of that. You will not be running away this time. You are a fool if you're thinking I'm running away from you. You might have won this battle, but soon the entire world will realize just what kind of madness you've created. You and your assembly have turned the natural order on its head. You've created a nation ruled by peasants and fishmongers, which performs surprisingly better than a committee of bittering, corrupt aristocrats ruled by a puppet placed on a fancy chair by foreign armies. For now. But what do you think will happen when this war is over? What do you think will those petty fools you rule do once there are no more enemies around? Who will your assembly blame for bad harvest or freezing winters? The order existed because the masses had to have someone to fear and to hate, someone to blame for all their misfortunes, and you have destroyed this order. But your crimes are worse, far worse, for that madness you've created is spreading across the world like a plague, as so many of Hanover, Sweden, Russia and Austria, men who knew their place just a few years ago, rise up against their betters, thinking they have a right to usurp positions held for centuries by their superiors. This is why I did what I did. This is why I will not give up now. Soon other kingdoms and empires across the world will realize what plague you are upon this world and will unite to put you down for good, like Britain united with Austria. The British are fools, and in time they will pay for it. The Empire was supposed to fall. This was a necessary sacrifice, but the British were supposed to land in your heartlands while you were busy here. But instead that foolish woman decided to keep her forces in Spain. She'll learn the price of her betrayal soon enough, when other monarchies around the world will unite to take you down. And as for me, I may not be able to leave this place alive, but at the very least I can go down as a man responsible for taking down 2 presidents. I don't know what you expected coming here, but let me show you why they called me August the Strong. Ah! No challenge as expected. This is what happens when you give a sword to a peasant. Perhaps, but it made you turn around. I think we've heard enough. In your hands, kid. He was using us this whole time. All this war, this retribution for assassination of your leader was his fault. I should have expected that. His murder was too heavy-handed for Leopold, but at least now we have a chance to make him pay for all of it. And thanks for having my back, Lieutenant Zintler. You did good. The Commonwealth will be honored to have you on board. You'll excuse me if I won't jump for joy, though I suppose I don't have much of a choice now. So, what are you going to do with this one? 14 years ago, one clever craftsman from Warsaw created a device he donated to the revolution. A beheader of kings, he called it. When assembly rose to power, they built thousands of them, though now, after public decency was disbanded, most of them have been disassembled. But one of them remains on the main square in Warsaw, waiting for a suitable guest. We never had a chance to place an actual monarch on it, so I'm sure its creators will be happy to finally see it do what it was made for.